Hey everyone, welcome back to RJK English. Today we're going to talk about something that I have been discussing with my students, caffeine and the modern world. So let's start with, what is caffeine? What do you think of when you think of caffeine? Caffeine is a drug, we could call it a drug. It's in tea and coffee. So if we think about, here's my coffee, right? Here's my coffee mug. You can see the tea in here, and here's this is our coffee or tea. Okay, when I'm in India, I drink chai. When I'm in the US, I drink coffee. So I drink tea in India, I drink coffee here. So we know caffeine is the thing that's in coffee or tea that makes you kind of wake up, right? And as my student Kuldeep mentioned, it can also be addictive and maybe it's not good. Okay, so you can have different views on this. But let's talk about how it's connected to the modern world. What do we mean by the modern world? Sometimes when we say in the modern world, I just mean the last 30 years. Maybe I mean the modern world because the iPhone came along and people use the internet, okay? We can use it in this way, but in a way, when we say the modern world, we mean probably the last 150, maybe 100 years. And what do we mean by the modern world? What's the difference between the modern world and the older world? There's a change from tradition to modernity. And we're talking about values here as well, right? Tradition. And what would we call today? We don't have another word for it, right? Modern. Modernity. Modernity. What's the difference between traditional life and modern life? So let's take, for example, my family. So my family is from a rural area, which would be farming area. We call it rural and urban. Farm, country, we also call it the country, and city. Okay? I come from a rural area. The largest city, I grew up in the largest city in the state of Iowa. It had 200,000 people. That's pretty small. So, but even there, we lived a modern life. But my family is from the country, and in traditional family life, what happens? People get married right after high school. They have children soon, right? They might have a lot of children. They live near their family. And they have traditional values, right? Modernity brings new values. Maybe you don't care about having children as much. You know, maybe you don't care about getting married as much. Maybe you're more accepting of other people. I knew people in a man from South India. I was friends with him in college. And he was from the lower caste in Tamil Nadu. And when he was in his home village, he was low caste. And he didn't like it. He didn't like the feeling he got. When he went to the city, he was just who he was. You know, there was some casteism, but overall he could just be himself. So there's some benefits to modernity. What about being gay or LGBTQ? Modernity helps with this, right? What about women's rights? What about race? Racism is much more pronounced, usually in rural areas than in the city. That's not always true, but in general. So there's benefits to modernity. What do we think of when we think of modernity? We think of money, right? But let's think about it a little bit differently. What is life like in the modern world? I get up at a certain time. I go to a job. I have to catch the bus in order to go to that job. I have to be there on time. I work 8 hours. I have a lunch break. Then I come home. My children come home from school. We talk for a while, or maybe I help them with their homework. And then I get up and I do the same thing the next day. Right? That's basically the modern world. The modern world is about the watch or looking at my phone at the time on my phone, right? That's what the modern world is. What was traditional? Traditional, maybe the clock was not the clock is very important in the modern world. The clock was not as important in the traditional world, right? If you're on a farm, when do you get up? You get up when the sun comes up. When do you go to sleep? When the sun goes down. You know, when do you get outside of? When do you take a break? When the sun is too hot. What if someone's going to come and visit you? Do you go, what time are you going to come visit? No, you go, oh, you're coming next week? Okay, when you come, just come to our home, we'll take care of you. Right? But what about in the modern world? Oh, when are you coming? What time? What time is your flight? So the modern world is a place where time is imposed on us. At one time in the past, the clock existed, but time, I'm going to say time didn't exist. Time, of course, existed. But the clock in the city was different from the clock in the country. The clock in New York City was different from the clock in Iowa. The clock in Mumbai was different from the clock in Calcutta. We didn't have standard time. Now, my time, literally now, I used to have to wind my watch and choose the time, but my phone keeps the time for me, and this matches the time elsewhere. The time itself might be different. So India is, I think, 9.5 hours ahead of me right now, or maybe 10.5. I think it's 9.5. But the seconds and minutes are the same. It's exactly 9.5 hours ahead of me, right? Because we have standard time. Think about how different that was for traditional society to suddenly be on standard time, right? How odd that is. How weird is it that I have to show up to work right on time? If I'm 5 minutes late, that's crazy. Think about this time. They didn't even 5 minutes. What's 5 minutes, right? So now let's go back to caffeine. We see our modern world. Oh, let's stop for a second. Why do values change in the modern world? Why do values change? Because you don't have as much time and money, right? In the modern world, you need to go to a job all day, right? Here, you could work on the farm, or you had a business, and you know, even now, some people that own businesses, you can still have your family life on the side. This is a very regulated world. Time is imposed on you. Clock, time, structure, is imposed. Imposed on you. That's, your structure comes from outside. In traditional society, your structure was basically natural. Imagine the difference. Think about when you first send a child to school. How do they have to be to the bus on time? What is that? How weird that is. You know, you have to learn to be in this world. And it's a very structured world. You're going to come visit me? What time are you coming? Because I have to be home from work. We have to go get the kids. What time? I can meet with you for these 2 hours. That's the modern world. So our values change. We don't want as many children because it's very expensive and we don't have as much time. How are we going to fit it in? We don't want to get married because we're all in a big area. We can meet many different people. You know, there's reasons why these values change. But let's focus on caffeine. What does caffeine help us do? It helps us regulate our inner clock. It does two things. One, it helps us regulate our inner clock. Two, it helps us concentrate on boring tasks or on difficult intellectual tasks. Why are the Olympics so important in the modern world? They weren't as important before because we're not physical now. The world is getting more and more mental, right? I sit at my desk, I talk, I type. I'm not being physical. In this world, I didn't have to worry about working out. I was physical all the time, right? So one, it helps me regulate my clock. I have to work according to this imposed structure. So it helps me to wake up so that I get to the bus on time. And then when I'm at work, it helps me to deal with the fact that I have to deal with this boring job or a very intellectually taxing job. I have to focus on this. It helps me to focus. Especially me, I probably have ADHD, and it helps me to focus, you know? Even the idea of ADHD, it's a very modern problem. Why is ADHD a problem? Because it's hard to fit into this imposed time, right? So the caffeine helps me do this. What about when I travel? I go to India, right? All of a sudden I'm on a different time zone and I have to adjust. Caffeine helps me to adjust, right? So caffeine's very important to the modern world because of how we work. We're not physical. The work is often not very meaningful to us. Before we were working on our farm or we were doing something physical, we didn't have to concentrate as much. So this is what caffeine does for us. So what do you think? Is caffeine important to our modern world? More important? Do you agree or disagree? My student Kuldeep, he does not believe in having caffeine, but he still manages this. So tell me what you think, all right? And if you want to check out a book or an article, there's an author, Michael Pollan, Pollan. He wrote a book on caffeine and how it helps us in this modern world. All right? See you next time. Make sure to like and subscribe. It will help me make these videos. Make sure to comment and look below, RJK English. Go to RJK English on Facebook and we can have even more of a conversation. All right? See you.